Welcome to the Rational Egoist. I'm your host, Michael Leibowitz. Well, I've been out of prison now almost 17 months after 25 years. So I'm relatively new to social media. And I've noticed on social media, people are very rude. There's a lot of negative interactions on there. People say things that I don't see or hear people saying when they're in person or at the store. And I often wonder how this affects people and why people act that way. So I reached out to somebody to come on the show and talk to us about it. He is a quadruple board certified physician, a mental health and wellness expert, and founder and principal of Pursuit Coaching, Dr. Peter Loper, Dr. Pete Loper Jr. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael. Thanks so much for having me on.
Hopefully, I won't be stuttering that much as we go through the interview. Otherwise, it's going to be a very long one.
Sounds good. Hopefully,
So,
I won't stutter either.
So, how much time does the average person spend on social media?
It's a great question. Those numbers continue to evolve. There are some estimates that for the average person, they're spending upwards of 6 hours daily on a screen. Now, that doesn't necessarily capture the volume of time or the amount of time they're on social media, but I think we all can recognize that a large bulk of that time is probably spent specifically on social media, just based on how those social media platforms are designed to function, consistently kind of demanding that time and attention from those who engage and interact in those on those social media platforms.
Now, what effect does all that time online, whether it's social media or otherwise, what effect does that have on the human brain, especially that of a not fully developed brain like we have in children and adolescents?
Yeah, so I think that we're still learning more about the downstream impact on neurodevelopment and brain on the brain, especially in our younger kids at earlier ages and stages of development. But at a more superficial level, more reductionist space, we get into the reward pathway. The reward pathway is really what informs addiction. It involves dopamine and it involves certain parts of the brain that reinforce a certain type of behavior as informed by that dopamine response, that dopamine hit. And social media, and specifically scrolling through social media, activates the reward pathway, and it stimulates the release of dopamine in this certain portion of the brain. And over a period of time, just like with any other addiction, you can develop what's called a dopamine deficit state, meaning that you need more and more and more of the social media interaction to achieve the same sense of benefit or pleasure, dopamine being very a pleasure neurohormone, neurotransmitter associated with pleasure and reward. You need more and more social media interaction in order to achieve the same benefit. And at also a certain point, you may need more and more social media engagement just to feel normal. And when you get into a significant enough dopamine deficit state or dopamine deficient state, it can actually really impact your mood. We also know that we get into this conversation with serotonin, the intimate interaction between serotonin and dopamine, serotonin being another neurotransmitter, commonly associated with depression, although that data has kind of now been really called into question. Another conversation for another day, but dopamine is the one neurotransmitter in the brain that actually can make your serotonin levels drop. And so there's probably a lot more going on. The reductionist framing to kind of better understand it, or just a conceptualized bird's eye view, involves dopamine, addiction, the reward pathway. And the more you use social media, bottom line, the more likely you are to become dependent on engaging with social media just to feel normal.
That sounds a lot like what I've heard about pornography, about people becoming addicted to pornography. They end up getting it starts maybe with just something simple like your standard, it's not there anymore, but Playboy magazine. And then it exacerbates and gets worse and worse, more graphic, more purient, for lack of a better word. Is it a similar dynamic taking place?
Absolutely. In fact, viewing pornography involves many of the same. It certainly involves the reward pathway and dopamine, but the two other neurohormones or neurotransmitters that are implicated in social media use and also pornography are going to be norepinephrine and serotonin. And so when we're talking about the human experience of attraction, the three brain chemicals or neurotransmitters that are implicated in, again, reductionist, it's probably way more complex than this, but for the best at positivism or the philosophical construct that we utilize to better understand things can really define. It's these three neurotransmitters: norepinephrine, dopamine, and serotonin. So when you're looking at porn, or when you're scrolling through social media, the porn really reinforces that those three neurotransmitters: engagement in the brain, release of brain in the brain of those three neurotransmitters, that initial attraction. But what's missing from social media and also from pornography are these two other neural hormones called oxytocin and vasopressin, which are intimately implicated in the process of sustained relationships and relating to people on a deep, meaningful level. And so you get this overabundance and too much dopamine that then ultimately leads to a dopamine deficient state, paradoxically. And then you also get a lot of norepinephrine and serotonin. But you're exactly right. Just to summarize it, it's probably a very similar mechanism that reinforces social media use, that also reinforces pornography use.
I remember when I was, I don't know, maybe 18 or 19, and I watched a special on PBS about heroin addiction. And they talked about heroin and other opiates. They called them pretenders back then. I don't know if they still do. But the video that they showed was of endorphins. And they showed that when somebody has a pain, maybe they get cut or bang their knee or something, endorphins are released and they, fill, I guess they were probably neurons. And that lowers the pain threshold. And then they said that when you use heroin or other opiates more and more, your natural endorphins stop working. So then when the heroin or other opiates aren't there, you experience a deficit, and you end up feeling pain, sickness, withdrawals. Is it a similar thing with the dopamine deficit that you're talking about?
Absolutely. And just to be clear, that same reward pathway that I'm describing for social media use, the reward pathway, it's intimately implicated in any kind of addiction, to include opioid addiction. Now, you're exactly right. With the opioids, you have the mu and the kappa receptors, the endorphins, and et cetera. But the bottom line is it's the same fundamental mechanism. But that's spot on. The dopamine deficit state, ultimately what happens is it can mediate the symptoms of withdrawal from heroin use. It can also mediate the symptoms of withdrawal from marijuana use, the symptoms of withdrawal from anything that stimulates that pathway. And we see that a lot with social media. So in somebody who decides that they're going to, acutely and abruptly stop using social media, you can develop some withdrawal symptoms. And a lot of times those withdrawal symptoms would look like what we call anhedonia, maybe not getting pleasure out of things that you would previously enjoy. It may be some irritability. It may even disrupt your sleep cycle a little bit. You may notice a change in your appetite. These are kind of some soft signs of withdrawal symptoms. Now, this hasn't been demonstrated very robustly in the data, but as you can imagine, it's probably really hard to do so, because it's probably really hard to isolate social media as being the only thing that's going to hit that reward pathway, right? And say, okay,
Yeah.
that's the culprit. But keep in mind also, the more that you use social media, the more that you'll have to use social media not to experience that withdrawal symptom. And that's kind of the issue, is that you get to this point where in order just to feel like you're having any semblance of pleasure, or you're getting any enjoyment or fulfillment in life, you have to engage with that social media. Because the more you use it, the more you need it to promote that dopamine release. And then, of course, if you abruptly stop using it, you certainly can be at risk for developing withdrawal symptoms that look a lot like what we might define as depression.
I've found it astounding how nasty some people can be on social media. Like I do a lot because I'm trying to promote the podcast. So I'm on social media very frequently, and I make videos for TikTok and Instagram. And when I first started, the amount of people that would comment because I have a chipped tooth, it was amazing. They like people I don't know, go see a dentist. It's like, really? Like that's what you're going to comment on? But I wonder, how does that affect people? All the negative content in the going back and forth and insults and that sort of thing. How does that affect people? And again, especially kids. I remember I saw a meme, ironically, on social media where a guy said, "Here we have this great invention where we can communicate around the globe with each other instantaneously, and yet I use it to argue with people I don't know." So that can't be healthy, like I said, especially for young people.
No, and so that, I think, is a often overlooked but fundamental issue related to social media use. So when we're looking at normal human development, there's very specific stages that occur in terms of our psychological development and our social development. And one of the most crucial stages is a moment in time where we start to develop a psychobabble term called object constancy. Object constancy, put more simplistically, is this moment in time where the developing human starts to recognize that I have my own internal experience, my own wants, my own desires, my own needs, my own will, right? My own feelings, my own thoughts. And mom or primary attachment figure, dad, whoever, has their own internal experience. My favorite color is red. Mommy's favorite color is blue. Mommy still loves me, even though my favorite color is red. And I still love mommy, even though her favorite color is blue. But red's my favorite color. Red's the best color, but mommy still loves blue, right? So it's this capacity to tolerate both and. I have my own internal experience. You have your own internal experience, and both can coexist simultaneously. It's also this moment in time where we start to develop this capacity to appreciate that somebody can be really angry and behaving in a manner that conveys anger, but they still love me and I'm still of value, right? And so the reason that this is so crucial and this moment in time of establishing object constancy is so crucial, it sets the fundamental underpinnings. It hardwires the human being, the developing human, to be able to integrate into community. And that is the name of the game of being human, right? We are who we are by virtue of our meaningful interpersonal interactions embedded in the context of a community. And that community is informed by this idea of reciprocity and the idea that whatever you're deficient in, I can accommodate for, and vice versa. I'm going to be deficient in something, and you're going to accommodate for me in my deficiency. And collectively together as a community, we're going to survive and we're going to thrive, right? And so when you look at social media, it totally destroys this construct of object constancy that all of us, for the most part, many of us, right, most of us, we're going to achieve that, the capacity to tolerate both and at a very early stage in our childhood development. But when you create a synthetic environment where people are relating to each other in very artificial ways, it totally destroys that construct of the ability to tolerate both and the way in which the algorithm that drives social media it thrives and works is it reinforces a very explicit thought process and a very explicit way of thinking and believing. So it creates a dichotomy. It creates the construct of black and white thinking. So instead of both and, it's us versus them, me versus you. And we totally lose the capacity or that sense of reciprocity and the capacity that my value within the construct of community is as much informed by what I'm not good at as by what I'm good at, right? So it totally skews that. And then we also have this other layer, socially prescribed perfectionism. And I know I'm going here, so you stop me
No, it's
if
okay. It's a
um,
complicated subject. Go ahead.
yeah. And so there's this concept called socially prescribed perfectionism. And basically what socially prescribed perfectionism says is that you don't belong in our community. You don't belong in society unless you achieve the status of perfection, which is absolutely unattainable. So what happens is that and this thrives in social media, you create this flawless avatar and you present it to the world. And then you seek these likes, right? And then your value as a human being is only as good as however many likes you got. But that's only temporary, it's transient. And then you have to post another post, because if you don't, then the post that you posted yesterday isn't sufficient to maintain that sense of perfection that is required to achieve and attain that sense of belonging. So it's very, very dangerous because it's in direct opposite to the way in which humanity and human beings are hardwired to engage with one another. And it totally throws that on its head. And so then you are in a situation where you're out there and you're presenting yourself to the world and you're engaging with people in a social media platform, and then they're going to be making comments about a chipped tooth, right? Because that construct of reciprocity and the idea that you and I, we're working on the same thing, we're running in the same direction. You may have a belief that's a little bit different than mine, but that's cool, man. We're all in this together, and it totally destroys that, and it creates this dichotomization.
That social perfection thing, I find very fascinating because I know people who post to Facebook, and everybody I see on Facebook, they promote this view of themselves and their family as if they're, leave it to Beaver. You know what I mean? The ideal family. But what I find interesting isn't necessarily that people do that, but the very people that do that believe the presentation that others are giving. So they'll, oh, but their family looks so happy. And I'm just like, wait a second, you know what you're doing. Why don't you understand they're doing the same thing? But people don't. And so like everybody seems to buy, and I hate using a word like everybody, but a lot of people seem to buy that fiction that what they're seeing is reality when it's not. It reminds me of the back of a book where all the praise is on the back of the book because they don't put the criticisms on the back of the book. All the negative reviews don't go there. So all you say, wow, this must be a great book. Look, everybody loves it. And Facebook in particular gives me that appearance.
Absolutely. Amen. And, I think anybody who's been on Facebook or some of the other social media platforms, they've had that experience where they go on this great vacation, and it's to some great location. And then they get back and they're scrolling through social media and so, is in Paris. And they're like, oh man, they have such a great life. Like they're living the life, right? And you literally just got back from, wherever, the Bahamas or something, and you're comparing yourself in this framing that totally skews your perception of reality, and it changes your perspective. And perspective is everything, right? It's that thoughts are energy, and our thoughts are very, very powerful. And so if we're consistently engaging in a framework, in a construct, social media, that is constantly reinforcing that we're deficient, then we will begin to internalize that, and our thoughts will be totally focused, our attention, that spotlight within our conscious awareness that is going to be constantly focused in this space of insufficiency. And that comes with a lot of consequences.
I don't know. Have you ever seen the movie The Godfather?
Oh, absolutely. Yes.
Okay.
Classic.
There's a part in The Godfather when Michael Corleone says that he wants to be the one to kill Sollozzo and the cop. I don't remember the cop's name right now. But Sonny Corleone tells Michael, this isn't like war where you get to shoot a guy from a mile away. Here, you got to go right up on him and get his blood all over you. And to me, social media is similar to that dynamic because the anonymity and the distance that people have allows them to be cruel and mean because they get to see the other person, one, as not another human being, but also they're devoid or they're distanced from the threat that when you say that to somebody in person, you might actually end up with a real problem. First of all, am I right that that's taking place? And secondly, how common and how much does that feed the negative interactions?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's so spot on. I think you're exactly right. There's this element of depersonalization, that actually what I'm engaging with right now when you and I are talking isn't you. It's a representation of you on a synthetic screen made of
Right.
plastic and other things, right?
Yeah.
And so that there's that physical distance and that separation. I can see kind of what you look like, but I'm not present with you. And when we're communicating, there is an exchange of energy here. I can look in your eyes, but we're not making direct eye contact. And so there is this sense of distance. And I think it's even worse on social media because it's posts, right? It's not actually the human being. You're not looking at them directly, real time, and you're certainly not in person. And then it's words, which are just symbolic representations of thought. They're not actually genuine. And 90% of communication is nonverbal when you're engaging with somebody. And the way in which you engage with somebody in person is much different because it's informed by that nonverbal communication. It's informed by the feelings that the body language evokes while you're talking, right? And you're trying to read that other person. That's totally absent in the synthetic contrived construct that we've created in social media. And I think it creates exactly what you're describing, the sense of distance, so that you don't feel it the same when you're attacking
Yeah.
somebody.
When I was released from prison, November 2022, I couldn't wait to go to my old neighborhood, the neighborhood I grew up in. So I went there and I walked around. And now it was November, so it was a little cold, but nonetheless, what struck me was there were I grew up in a housing project. So there were kids everywhere when I was a kid playing football, baseball, fighting, whatever. What struck me was there were no kids outside. But I said, well, maybe it's November, it's cold, whatever. But I drive through there all the time and I never see kids out there. They're never playing football. There's nobody in the backyards, in the streets, nothing. Now, of course, it's possible there's just less kids there. I ultimately don't know, but I don't see that anywhere. It seems like kids are far less engaged in groups and in playing. And there's other factors I want to be clear with than social media. For instance, they've changed the laws related to driving. So when I was 16, my 16-year-old friends could come pick me up. We'd pile into a car, and you can't do that anymore. So that's that's part of it. But I just have to wonder, what is the effect on kids that they're not getting the social interactions, the in-person relationships? And not only that, but when I was a kid, if Joe did something stupid, we spread it around the school and everybody knew, and then it died out. But now this stuff goes on social media and it's there forever. And these kids pass it around like that. And you're like, oh my, I can't imagine what that's doing to these kids. But I might just be the old guy now who's saying these kids today. You know what I mean? So what is the truth of the matter?
So I don't think you're the old guy saying these kids today. And I think that, again, everything you just said is so spot on. Trees grow in soil and sunlight. Human beings develop in the medium of interpersonal interactions, real time, face to face. I mean, think about your childhood growing up. Um, Outside playing football, baseball, basketball, hooping, right? All of those, it was play, but there was this component of social interaction that is crucial for integrating into community. And community is the space in which human beings continue to develop in a healthy manner. When we're talking about healthy human development, it is analogous to the term well-being. Well-being and healthy development are the same thing. Well-being is a dynamic kinetic process, as is human development. And again, the way in which humans develop is via meaningful interpersonal interactions. And so even within the construct of competition, like baseball or a sport or even a fight, right, there's a sense of co-cooperation that's necessary in order to engage, even in that competitive framing. And so the value of those experiences for kids is immense. I mean, I don't think we can really estimate. I mean, it's exponential. And when you remove kids from opportunities to engage in real-time interpersonal interactions, whether it's just kind of hanging out and listening to music or playing video games together, even if a screen is involved, or whether it's actually playing sports or other things, it's going to impair their development. It's going to impair specifically their psychological and their social development. And I think a lot of the downstream symptom indicators in terms of the uptick in mental illness and in terms of a lot of the issues that we're dealing with more globally, not just in our country, but as a species, are a downstream symptom indicator of the compromise and the degradation of that core community construct and those meaningful interpersonal interactions that I remember when I was a kid. Like during the summer, it was the second the sun was up, I'm outside, there's a huge group of kids, and we're just doing it, right? Like we're together the entire day. We'll pop into somebody's house, we'll get lunch there. Like our parents have no clue where we are, right? We're gone from sun up to
Yeah.
sundown and maybe even later. That just doesn't happen anymore. But those types of interactions are crucial.
It just occurred to me that as social media creates an artificial environment where people get a false view of what's going on, this very interview might be doing the same thing because we're focusing on the negatives of social media. So if somebody were just to tune in up to this point, they'd say about us, oh, these guys, they're anti-social media. But the fact of the matter is, I happen to think social media by and large is a net plus. So, what are some of the benefits of social media? Just so I just don't want to give the impression that this is just this terrible thing because it's really not. It allows, well, I don't want to spoil it. I want to give you the chance. What are some of the benefits?
So that is a beautiful illustration of that psychobabble term I referenced earlier, the object constancy, the capacity to tolerate both
Yeah.
and to recognize it's just not black and white. And you're exactly right. There are immense benefits to social media. And I mean, it's pretty intuitive. We can think about them, right? We're able to connect with people across the globe. We're able to change the way that we think about things. We're able to galvanize around a common cause, large groups of people, and make immense progress. The big concern I have is that any technology that's not imbued with human conscience has the potential to do tremendous harm. And the name of the game, in terms of the way in which social media is designed, is to consistently demand your time and attention. And you spell love and meaningful interpersonal interactions, TIME and ATTENTION. There's only 24 hours in the day. And so if social media was designed and imbued with human conscientiousness and conscience such that it was augmenting our ability to connect simply by virtue of creating those opportunities to support our healthy development and creating these great connections across the globe and otherwise, that would be one thing. But again, I think that where I get stuck is that the name of the algorithm that drives the way in which social media works is that it's all about competing and consistently reinforcing you engaging with that social media platform instead of engaging in those meaningful real-time interpersonal interactions that are a rate limiting step to being healthy and well as a human being.
Now, we talked in some depth about the addictive nature of social media. But as with any addiction, whether it be drugs, alcohol, social media, pornography, human beings ultimately, at least at the age of maturity, we're responsible agents, and we can make choices. I know I was a heroin addict, and one day I decided I'm done with this, and I haven't done it since. That's 20 years ago now. And people make responsible choices all the time. Nevertheless, there's a lot of people in society that want the government passing laws in relation to social media, whether it be banning TikTok or saying children can't be on the internet, whatever. I'm totally opposed to the government getting involved. I think it's overreach. And I think that when the government does something, there's just such a high potential for abuse. So, what are some things that people can do themselves and parents can do to help moderate the dangers that we've talked about?
Yeah, so that is such a powerful question, and I just want to acknowledge that because how often do we outsource our agency and responsibility to a social construct, to
Right.
an institution, right? And then in doing so, it totally undermines our ability then to make meaningful change for us personally, and then also for those that we love and care about and within the community that we physically are present in. And I think that's a crucial, crucial point to note. And so the way in which that you, and it also, I got to throw this in there too. I mean, the way in which that works is that oftentimes as a culture and society, we're consistently confounding fault with responsibility. And I see this in healthcare on a day in and day out basis. We can talk about it as it relates to obesity, addiction, and otherwise. It may not be somebody's fault that they develop a disease process, an addiction, that they develop, cancer, something like that. But at which time we support them in outsourcing their agency to the institution that is the healthcare, to their physician, whatever the case may be, then we undermine their capacity to take personal responsibility for that. And I think that's a violation of somebody's autonomy. And I think we have to be very, very careful about not doing that. As it relates to social media, there's a lot of different strategies. So first and foremost, kids are going to be less prone to be able to control themselves as it relates to social media. And they're also going to be more naive and willing to discount any potential pitfalls. And so for parents, one of the best things that you can do for your kids is limit their access to screens for as long into their developmental process as you can. Right now, we have a 17-year-old in our house. She's driving. She's got to have a cell phone. I mean, she's got to have a screen. But we were able to hold off until she got her license a year ago, and then now she's got a cell phone. Maybe that doesn't work for every parent. Maybe it's too late. You've already introduced those tablets. If that's the case, then the next best step is what are those technical tools that you can use to limit the amount of time your kid is engaging with screens and specifically social media, and then B, also how do you monitor what they're doing on social media, what they're posting and what posts they're reading. So there's great apps out there. The one that I recommend is called Bark, Bark. You can install it on any smart device, smartphone, tablet, whatever, and you can actually monitor all of your kids' social media and communications, instant messenger, emails, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, I guess is really big with the kids now. You can monitor all of that. And so that you can help support them in making sure that they're safe and that whatever media they're engaging with is not going to reinforce the sense of deficiency. And then you can also set limits on the amount of time that they spend engaging in any given social media platform. The last thing is too, for the most part, unless it's a cell phone, if it is a tablet, you got to have Wi-Fi, and it's really easy to turn the Wi-Fi off. So at the end of the day, if you don't feel like, if you feel like the monitoring app as a parent is too invasive or it causes too much conflict, you can turn the Wi-Fi off, and all of a sudden it may not be working. And that can also be a really, really easy strategy. The last thing I would say too is that it takes the whole household to invest, right? One of the worst things that you can do as a parent is tell your kid to get off the social media, and
Yeah,
you're sitting
while
there
you're there.
right? So Adam Alter, who's a social psychologist at NYU, has coined the term sacred time. And so being intentional as a family and as parents, and saying that, from the hours when we get, done with, school, practice, work, everything, we sit down at 7, or we're all together at 7 p.m., right? From 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. everybody has to put their social media, their cell phone, their tablets in a basket. We lock that up in a cabinet, and we sit and we break bread and we're present together, right? And you try to do that as often as possible when you create that culture within the household to reinforce these healthy behaviors and a healthy relationship with social media. And then for adults, I mean, iPhones have been really great. I get a little screen time update every week, and so there's lots of different strategies that you can utilize and lots of data that's now available to help as an adult you make sure that you're not spending too much time engaging with screens and specifically social media throughout the course of the day. The last thing I would say too is you can take a social media break. That is totally a thing. And you can read about it, Google it. There's lots of different strategies as to how to do that. I've done it. I'm not on any social media except I am on LinkedIn, which I think counts. But you can take a social media break, and that can be very, very helpful and beneficial. And then one of the best things you can do during the course of the social media break is, journal while you're using social media. Take that break, journal while you're not using social media. See if there's a difference in the tone tenor of your journaling. See if there's a difference in your mood, improve sleep, things like that. That's really powerful positive reinforcement if there is.
Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Dr. Loper, is there anything that we left out that you think we need to cover?
Not that I can think of. I mean, I think that we hit most of it. And again, I cannot thank you enough for the opportunity to connect and
Thank you.
discuss this.
And where can people find you?
Yeah, so I have a website. It's Pete Loper, all one word, so PETELOPER.com. And there's ways to contact me and reach out on that website. I'm also on LinkedIn. That's the only social media I'm currently on. Although I do have a page on Facebook for my business, but I don't really utilize that a whole lot as it relates to this conversation. So yeah, those are the two best ways. Go to my website, reach out to me via the website, or connect with me on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Thank you very much. For now, this is the Rational Egoist signing out. I'm Michael Leibowitz. Till next time.